IoT Unplugged, where we talk to industry leaders, innovators, and major players in the Internet of Things, bringing you the best and latest insights. Tune in to learn more.
In this episode of IoT Insider, Caitlin Gittings speaks with Kirsten Newquist, CEO of Identiv, about the state of the RFID market. Kirsten explores how radio frequency identification systems are being used across an increasing number of industries to keep track of items and how the market could evolve further in the coming years.
Hi, Kirsten. Thank you so much for joining me on the IoT Unplugged podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Could you start us off by talking a little bit about who you are and how you got into the role that you do today?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Kirsten Newquist. I'm the CEO of Identiv. Identiv is a company that's in the IoT and RFID industry, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. I've been in my role for just a little over a year at this point. So it's exciting to be at the helm of this exciting company with exciting growth opportunities that lay ahead of us. So it's been really fun kind of diving in and getting to know all the employees, getting to know our customers, getting to know our shareholders. So exciting opportunity for me. I joined after spending about 17 years at Avery Dennison in a variety of different roles. So I started out in corporate strategy with them, helping them identify growth strategies for their business, ended up working in one of those growth businesses, ending up leading it for many years. And then I ended up joining Avery Dennison's RFID business, specifically working with them to develop their strategy in the healthcare segment itself. So spent a lot of time there at Avery Dennison. And prior to that, I had actually been involved both with a private equity-backed roll-up and before that, a VC-backed startup. So I've actually always been involved in, kind of growing and building businesses. And I think that's what has really attracted me to the Identiv opportunity, with being able to come in and really work with this interesting business in a really interesting area with some great capabilities and help them develop their growth strategy and really take them to the next level.
Great. No, thank you for that overview. We will be talking, of course, about RFID, but before we get onto that, let's pick up on this point you're making about growing and growth opportunities. How would you describe Identiv's strategy, and is it something that's evolved as the technology has evolved?
Yeah, definitely. And Identiv is actually kind of at a transition point. So Identiv sold off, it was really two different businesses, a physical security business and an RFID business. So just about a year ago, we sold off the physical security side of the business. That actually brought a fair amount of capital onto our balance sheet that now enables us to really focus exclusively on RFID and IoT, and really putting some investment back into the business so that we can go after these growth opportunities. So definitely there's been a big kind of turning point in the overall growth strategy for the Identiv business. And I spent a lot of time over the past year developing specifically the growth strategy for the IoT specific business, and excited about it. And we launched the strategy just about 6 months ago at this point, and it really revolves around three different pillars: perform, accelerate, and transform. And so perform is all about our existing customers, making sure that we're supporting them, delivering excellent product, doing everything we need to make sure that they are getting the product they need, that we're supporting them with next generation product. Accelerate is really where we're investing additional resources in some very specific areas and growth initiatives to build and accelerate our growth. And then transform is really around the inorganic part of our growth strategy, where we're looking for tuck-in acquisitions, interesting merger opportunities that allow us to get to greater scale faster, so that we can really expedite our growth. So that whole strategy has been put together over the last year. As I said, we kind of put it all together and really launched it at the beginning of 2025, and we're really busy executing against that strategy at this point.
Sure. So let's talk about the RFID market. What have you observed as kind of key drivers propelling it forward? Maybe for those who are listening who maybe aren't that familiar with RFID.
Yeah, no, definitely. There are definitely quite a few macro trends that really are, kind of enabling and growing the opportunity space for RFID. So I think certainly the proliferation of IoT devices, that obviously is a big one. We're seeing increasing regulation that's out there where RFID can really help with compliance. We're seeing issues around counterfeit products. And once again, we don't like to see an increase in counterfeiting, but obviously RFID can be one of the ways that counterfeiting can be addressed to ensure that it's not happening. So we're definitely seeing these big macro trends, and these macro trends that are out there are definitely creating a growing opportunity space for RFID and IoT.
Someone I spoke to about RFID to sort of crystallize, how important it is as a technology, mentioned that she saw it, the tags being applied to, I want to say cancer medicine, and the whole point of it was that hospitals only have a very limited supply of this medicine, and they wanted to make sure that when that medicine is needed, they know exactly how much they have, and it really put into perspective something as important as that and how RFID enables it. So yeah, what are some of the use cases you've seen that you think illustrate those people?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent example. And that's definitely one of the ones like, kind of cancer medications, putting some RFID tags on it to ensure that, kind of the hospital knows where it is. And even if you think about it, like taking that back all the way to the supply chain, the pharmaceutical supply chain, you can use RFID to make sure that you're tracking it carefully all through the supply chain. You can also use RFID technology married up with a sensor to ensure that medication, with many of them, have to be transported at very specific temperatures. You can use RFID to ensure that the temperatures are being monitored throughout the supply chain. And you can use RFID technology to ensure that you don't have a counterfeit product. And we've all seen, some of the media articles out there recently where there has been counterfeiting, and that has been a big problem for the pharmaceutical industry. So that whole kind of, pharmaceutical medication is a tremendous opportunity space where RFID can really make sure that drugs are getting to the patients when they need them, that they're not counterfeit, that they've been transported in the conditions that ensure that the effectiveness is fully there. So that's really a great use case, and one that we are very interested in supporting. And we actually have quite a bit of activity going around, kind of that specific pharmaceutical use case. We also see things, kind of in terms of consumables that need to be used both on the medical side and medical devices. So there's a lot of medical devices that use consumables, diagnostic test machines that you need, assays to be used to do the diagnostic tests. We see things like ventilators that have all sorts of parts that are consumables that need to be correctly assembled and the proper one used for certain patients. We also see consumables being used in consumer devices, and your printer, for example. And of course, the printer manufacturers want to make sure you're using the proper printer cartridge in their printer. And so this whole kind of opportunity space around consumable authentication and making sure that these, whether they're medical devices or consumer devices or other things, are using the appropriate consumable to ensure proper, the proper use, and in particular for the medical devices, that the medical device is actually giving the right service or the right results or whatever it is that you need. So that consumable authentication is a really interesting use case as well. And then, of course, we see the digital product passport. That's a big, kind of regulation that's coming into effect starting in 2027. That's really ensuring traceability and sustainability for many different product categories. So obviously RFID and NFC in particular is a technology that can really support compliance with those regulations. So those are some of the use cases that we see out there that we're excited about supporting.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit then about the digital product passport. So you briefly mentioned it's got sustainability at the heart, and RFID can be a technology enabler for that. What I'm interested to know is how you see the interplay between RFID and NFC. Are there any use cases that RFID excels in, any that NFC excel in? I'm assuming that they're not going to be competing, they're going to be working towards a mutual goal.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, NFC is kind of a subcategory of RFID, but a lot of people do assume RFID and kind of identify it a little bit closer to UHF technology. UHF technology is one of the types of technologies, that's under RFID, and UHF is often used when you're doing like inventory management of many different quantities, where you have a single reader and you're trying to get, this overall, kind of overall information about a lot of products all at once. NFC gives you the ability to kind of authenticate a single product. So if you want to know, like, what is this product, what has been the history, the supply chain associated with a single product, NFC gives you that one-on-one ability to authenticate. So where we see, kind of these different types of wireless bandwidth, so to speak, they each serve a different purpose. They each have a different set of benefits. And depending on the actual use case, you want to pick the right technology. So for digital product passport, definitely NFC is a good technology. That's that one-on-one authentication. So if you need to authenticate, kind of the life cycle of a product, where has it come from, originally, how was it manufactured, who has owned it over time, is it being, recycled properly? That it makes a lot of sense to use NFC so that you're tracking that one specific product and the information around it. So it's really good to use when you need to authenticate a specific product.
It's of course a really big opportunity for companies such as yourselves. But in a similar vein, I was wondering whether there were any challenges from the technology side that need to be addressed in order to be ready for this deadline of 2027.
Yeah, and certainly, and DPP, the regulation is really around being able to specifically track these different product categories as the regulations get rolled out. So NFC is definitely one of the technologies that can support compliance with these regulations. And of course, that's the one that we see a lot of value to using NFC. There are also other technologies that can be used to ensure compliance as well. And I think one of the things that's the biggest, kind of hurdle for companies as they need to really think about how to getting into compliance is, what do they need to do? How do they do it? This is complex. And we're really excited about a partnership we recently announced with a company called Naravera. They actually have the data platform that will allow companies to more easily get in compliance with DPP. So they have the complete data side of it. We can provide the NFC inlays that can be attached to all the different products and allow for the digital tracking and the digital identity of these different products. And between our inlays and Naravera's digital platform, it's a solution that we can take to customers to really help them understand what's needed, how to get going with what's needed, how to manage all that data. And really the goal there is to make it as straightforward as possible for companies who know they need to get into compliance, figure out what they need to do, because it is complex and it's not easy and it's another regulation. And so we're very excited about this partnership that really will help all of our customers get into compliance as the regulations roll out starting in 2027.
It's a great point, because I think sometimes when regulation gets introduced, there were a lot of questions, maybe a little bit of panic, a little bit of concern, and seeing that, it's great. It's great to hear you guys.
And it's also, there's the regulations have been kind of evolving over time as well. And so I think, being able to partner with a company that actually specializes, their whole business model revolves around DPP, we're really excited about, because they're at the forefront of the regulations, understanding how they need to be implemented, how the data needs to be managed, how to support the customers with it. I'm at the forefront of every little subtle change that's happened over the last 12 months. They're at the forefront of it. So we're really excited about partnering with them and being able to bring that level of knowledge and expertise on what is required to our customers. And the nice thing about the DPP regulations, there's certainly the specific information that's required to be in compliance with the regulations, but you can also use that same, if it's an NFC inlay, to not only be in compliance with the regulation, but all sorts of other benefits as well, such as consumer engagement. You can add, using that same inlay, you can add, kind of a consumer website that allows consumers to engage with your brand. You can allow consumers to authenticate, especially with, high value items, that they truly have the legitimate item and not a cheap knockoff. So there's a lot of not only compliance that, in terms of traceability and sustainability, but there's also these additional benefits that are the manufacturers and the brand owners can get from being in compliance with DPP. So that's a exciting opportunity as well.
And a really good example, I think, of how you use it to your advantage rather than seeing it as a burden or something you have to do. So.
Yeah, and I think that's really the opportunity for a lot of these companies. There's definitely the regulation side of it, which I think ultimately, the regulations will ultimately, I think, help them with operations, efficiency and productivity and all that. But there is added benefit for those who want to creatively look at it that way.
Sure. So we've touched a little bit on a couple of use cases, mentioned pharmaceutical, mentioned consumables, but it would be great to get an overview of not only the industries you serve, but how their requirements differ for smart labels depending on, where that label is going.
Yeah, no, it's really a fascinating business to be in because we support many different industries, for, as we mentioned, like pharmaceutical, luxury products, medical devices, children's books, logistics. Yeah, logistics. So we do really support this broad range of industries, and each of these industries has a different problem that they are trying to solve and how they want to use the technology. So there really is this huge variation of problems that are being solved where this technology, by adding, one of our inlays, tags, or smart labels onto a product, giving that product a digital ID, really helps to solve this wide variety of problems. Another use case that we just announced was with our partner named IFCO. They're one of the largest fresh grocery logistics providers in the world. They manage a pool of over 400 million reusable plastic containers that they transport this fresh produce, fresh groceries around the world. They want to add these smart BLE labels to be able to real-time track location, but also temperature, because as you can imagine, with fresh produce or fresh meat or fresh groceries, if they're not transported at the proper temperature, and in a time frame that's really critical, a lot of that fresh groceries is wasted. And so that's another example of a use case. And this is with our BLE technology that really enables real-time tracking, real-time temperature monitoring through the supply chain. So we do supply or work with a variety of industries. They all have different needs, and depending on the need, we are able to use different types of RFID and BLE technology to support the type of inlay, tag, or label that's required to really solve their problems.
Yeah, as I understand it, food waste is kind of baked into the supply chain, just because you can't always track the temperature. You might not have the technology in place. And I think what RFID has done has done a great job of highlighting, well, this doesn't have to be an issue that we've just accepted. And actually, you can track the temperature and you can make sure that the food that you're transporting doesn't end up being wasted, or the majority being wasted.
Exactly. Or if you see that the temperature is going out of, kind of the acceptable range, you can take some action during its journey to the final grocery store, right? And make sure that you're addressing these things. So it's a wonderful use case. And actually, our partner had told us that it's up to 30% of all fresh produce ends up getting wasted because it can't get to its final destination either as quickly or in the right environmental conditions that are required to keep it fresh. So that's a massive inefficiency in our supply chain for food. So we're excited about working with our partner to develop a solution that really will reduce that amount of waste significantly.
For sure. Could you then talk about some examples of deployments that have used your solutions? Any other partnerships that you think is worth highlighting?
Yeah, yes. I mean, IFCO, that's one we just very recently announced. We're still in the development phase, but we're excited about commercializing that with our partner IFCO early 2026. Another one I mentioned, children's books. This is one that I thought was a really interesting and great use case. So we're working with a Danish children's book publisher to develop a NFC label that gets applied to children's stories. And our partner developed a smart speaker that when you take that smart speaker and put it next to the children's book with the NFC label, then it'll read that book to a child. And so it really helps to kind of, help with early childhood literacy. Obviously, nothing replaces a parent reading, spending time reading to a young child. But, parents are busy, they are at work. And so this actually really enables, a young child to be able to have a book read to them. And it really utilizes our NFC inlay. So that's a really cool application. I love that application. We're excited that that's now being rolled out with our partner in Denmark.
That's always the kind of heartwarming human element of technology, where sometimes it can be easy to get bogged down in how things work and why they work the way they work, and instead it's just reading. I love that. So
Yeah. So as you can see, I mean, from all the way from pharmaceuticals, ensuring, the proper drug is getting to the proper patient, to food produce, making sure fresh produce is delivered to the grocery store, to, kind of anti-counterfeiting for luxury goods, to children's books. So you can just see this vast range of use cases that RFID and BLE and related technologies can really support. So it's a cool and exciting industry to be in.
You've touched on the solutions you offer being not only RFID but NFC, and I believe also Bluetooth Low Energy. And so my question to you is, I guess from a market perspective, from a customer perspective, how important is it to be able to provide these different technologies as opposed to just focusing on RFID, for example?
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, there's not one technology that is the winner or that will, kind of be, the one that's adopted, over time broadly. They each have a different set of kind of performance abilities. And so it really then is, what is our customer, what is the problem they're trying to solve? And then because we can offer this, our UHF, HF, NFC, low energy, Bluetooth, this different range of technologies, we can address whatever the problem is. So we're not just limited to one type of technology. So we think it's important to be able to have capabilities that cross all the different technologies, because it doesn't limit us to just one type of problem that needs to be solved. We really can listen to what the customer needs and make sure then that we pick out the appropriate technology that does the best job of getting at whatever it is that they need to solve. So, from our perspective, that's important. And we specifically at Identiv, we're focused on real specialized RFID applications. So the ones that take some, additional engineering, additional design work, where we think we can really add value compared to some of our competitors is really with some of that customized, unique engineering capabilities that we have. So when it's a more difficult environment that the tag has to be placed, or there's some kind of critical environmental requirements, we have some really, really clever engineers that can get in there, really design the right inlay, the right materials. And that's where we're really focused, is on more of these specialized applications.
Sure. Great. So with everything that we've spoken about, if we just look ahead into the future, what are the, and to summarize, what are going to be the big or the biggest opportunities for the RFID market and for Identiv?
Yeah, look, I think there's just a huge range of opportunities overall for all the competitors and all the players and all the partners in RFID, for all the reasons that we've talked about. I think specifically for us, we are excited about, kind of the DPP regulation and how NFC can really support that. We're very excited about our BLE, low energy Bluetooth capabilities. We were very much an early kind of industry participant in that space. We're seeing a lot of traction with that specific types of technology. So we do see really a big opportunity for low energy Bluetooth, and we're excited about, kind of our product roadmap that's developing to support it, specifically around logistics and being able to monitor whether it's pharmaceuticals or produce or any product that requires very careful tracking and condition monitoring along the way. So those are some of the things that we're very excited about.
Lots of exciting things in the pipeline.
Yep.
Well, before we wrap up, Kirsten, I wanted to ask you, is there anything you want to mention to those who are listening?
Well, gosh, thank you for the opportunity. Look, we're excited about just the space in general. We're excited about where the technology can go and the problems that it can solve. And we're definitely excited about working with our customers and our partners to make sure that we can get the right solutions out there to solve the right problems. And yeah, just excited to be part of this industry. So I appreciate the time you've given us today to have this conversation.
No, I enjoyed our conversation too. So thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for talking to me about RFID.
Okay, thanks a lot and have a great day.
IoT Unplugged.